Things looking a lot brighter today.
Somewhat brighter,
Somewhat
I think,
brighter.
after the bad day that there was yesterday. Here in Europe, not an awful lot of optimism around. The markets have opened in the red, but not terribly far down, it has to be said. In London in particular, it's just down 0.2%, so not very much at all. One share we're watching for you there is the troubled insurer RSA. Their shares up 4% after it was announced that the former Royal Bank of Scotland boss Stephen Hester would be joining the company to take over as chief executive. Over in Asia, after the sharp losses that we saw on Tuesday, things were definitely brighter there. The Nikkei closed up 1.23% after the huge falls that we saw in trading yesterday. One share that did particularly well there was Panasonic, closed up 19% after announcing it had returned to profit in the last 9 months of 2013. Mainland Chinese markets still closed because of the Chinese New Year, of course, but the Hang Seng in Hong Kong down almost 0.6%.
Close to Stephen's heart now, to Ireland next. Hearings in the trial of 3 former executives at one of the country's failed banks getting underway today, in fact.
Yeah, this case concerns Anglo-Irish Bank, largely be considered to be the bank that brought down the Irish economy. Bailing it out cost Irish taxpayers around €30 billion. The hearings begin later, mark the first criminal trial of bank executives that have taken place in Ireland since the banking sector effectively collapsed at the height of the Eurozone crisis. Well, for more on this story, we can go to Dublin and speak to John Isle, who's the markets correspondent at the Sunday Business Post newspaper. John, thank you for joining us on France 24. Can you just remind us of how central Anglo-Irish Bank was to the Irish economic crisis?
Well, it really can't be understated just how bad a bank Anglo was. At the time of the crash in September 2008, Anglo had about 100 million in assets. It was the third largest bank in Ireland by assets after AIB and Bank of Ireland. It had given out about 70 billion in loans to property developers, mainly who made up the customer base of the bank. It was really a specialist bank that had invested heavily in Ireland's property boom in the first decade of this century. What happened ultimately is that the property bubble burst and its biggest borrowers couldn't pay back their loans, and it wound up costing the Irish taxpayer about 34 billion euros, more than half of the value of the bailout.
These trials hearings that are beginning today are on very particular charges. Who is facing the court and what are they accused of?
Well, it's the former chairman, Sean Fitzpatrick, the former finance director, Willie McAteer, and the former managing director for lending, Patrick Whelan. And what they're accused of, or what they're charged with in this case, is operating an illegal share support scheme. In March 2008, when the markets first began to suspect that Anglo-Irish Bank was going to be in big trouble, these executives are alleged to have organized a group, a golden circle of 10 customers of the bank. It lent them money, according to the charges, in order to buy shares in the bank. The reason they had to do this was because one of the banks, in fact, the bank's biggest customer, Sean Quinn, who was an entrepreneur who owned concerns from cement to insurance, had built up a hidden position in the bank of about 24% using contracts for difference. Once the market understood that this was happening, there was a massive sell-off in the bank shares. And according to the charges, these executives organized to have a group slowly buy out the position of Sean Quinn in order to support the share price of the bank.
Okay, and this is, of course, the first criminal trial against bankers since that banking collapse. Presumably huge interest in it there in Ireland.
Oh, completely. Sean Fitzpatrick really has become, I suppose, the face of the bad banker in Ireland. Many banking executives can be held responsible for what happened to the economy and to the property market and to the banking system. But Sean Fitzpatrick seems to, in the public imagination, personify everything that has gone wrong in the last 5 or 6 years in Ireland. The trial is going to be watched very, very carefully. The media interest is so huge that they've had to add an overflow room in the court building here in Dublin. And it's likely to go on, we were told by the judge, possibly until the end of May. So it will be a long, detailed trial with over 100 witnesses, hundreds of pieces of documentation, and many hours of testimony.
Okay, we're following that closely, of course. John Isle from the Sunday Business Post in Dublin, thank you for joining us.
Next story now, we got a change at the top of Microsoft.
Yeah, bringing an end to what was considered probably the biggest celebrity or corporate Guess Who of last year, who was replacing Steve Ballmer at the head of Microsoft. It's a man called Satya Nadella. He was the head of the cloud computing division at the world's largest software maker. He's taking over and says he's going to direct the company more towards a mobile first and cloud first business, but he will have Bill Gates on side as a technical advisor, going back getting more involved in the company to look over his shoulder.
And finally, the ratings agency Standard & Poor's, they're under fire in Italy, in fact, for not giving enough value to the country's culture.
Yeah, that's right. This is according to the Italian Court of Auditors, which has said that S&P didn't give enough value when they were downgrading Italy at the height of the economic crisis in 2011 to its culture. They said that the ratings agency had ignored Italy's history, art and landscape, which are the basis of its economic strength. The damages they claim they could seek from Standard & Poor's of up to 234 billion euros. S&P says it's aware of the legal action, but is also facing another case for $5 billion from the US authorities, claiming that it fraudulently inflated ratings over certain kinds of debt.
Yeah, interesting looking at those pictures. You can see why they think they might be worth a little bit more. Beautiful images. All right, Stephen, thanks very much. Stephen Carroll with Business here on France 24. We've got a Sochi special for you now because Flo's here with the international